Georgia Bulldogs, come on down. Do you have a culture problem? Now, I hate this phrase, culture problem. I'm not a big fan of that cliche. Aaron.
What is it about it? It's just too coach speaky, or what? It's not even coach speak. It's just.
It's
cliche.
not specific enough. It's not. It doesn't define the situation. Like, there's not tight ends murdering people at Georgia. You know,
True.
like that.
Yeah.
Like it's not like Kirby Smart is intentionally going about trying to, like, make people bad. Like, you know what I mean?
No.
I think they are on their way to having a major problem.
Yeah.
That's where I want to start. So because I'm going to take it to a place that I don't think many SEC shows are going to take it. But let's give you some quick thoughts here. 9 players have been arrested since January of 2022. So a little over a year, we've got 9 arrests. Almost
just Georgia?
For Georgia. Just Georgia. Almost all of them have resulted in little to no discipline from the legal system. A couple of them are extremely serious. We know, obviously, about Jalen Carter and the 2 young people who passed away tragically in a car accident, which is tragic. Stetson Bennett, public intox, no big deal. Okay, doesn't need to be that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But you also had Dumas Johnson, the linebacker, 5 days earlier arrested for racing and reckless driving. Trevon Walker, the number 1 pick last year, drove into 2 cars late at night in April of 2022. Very late at night. No citation. Nothing. Kenny McIntosh, April 25th, 4 a.m. He got into a crash going 20 over. A woman was in the hospital. Reckless driving charge. Nolan Smith, who just dominated the combine, was going 89 and a 55, and he got a, quote, pretrial diversion program. That's it. And I got some more on Nolan Smith in just a second. Javon Bullard got a DUI with 7 misdemeanors. There's an actual charge. Even the long snapper was destroying property when intoxicated.
That's normally the most low-key player on the team, besides maybe
right.
like a third-string kicker.
2 misdemeanors, simple battery for Warren Brinson. Ra Thomas, a transfer who didn't even play in the national championship games, got a felony for false imprisonment. But I want to take, so that's just like in the last.
What's false imprisonment again?
It was like holding a woman against her will, basically. But
that's
again, you have
good.
to go read about the story. By and large, not just Kirby in Georgia, but the legal system. One of these was the Jalen Carter. When Jalen Carter first got pulled over, in September, he was doing 89 and a 45, and the police officer said, "You need to chill out, or you're going to eventually go to jail." Nothing happened. Got nothing. No, not a ticket, not a citation, nothing. So I say all this not to be like, oh, it's all Kirby's fault. It's not. It's not. That's not what I'm saying here. I want to go back to Isaiah Wilson. Now, I don't know if you remember Isaiah Wilson, Maren.
I don't really.
Isaiah Wilson was a first-round draft pick in 2020 from the Georgia Bulldogs. He skipped his senior season. He was drafted in the first round by the Tennessee Titans here in Nashville. Before he played 4 total combined snaps in the NFL. First-round pick. $11 million contract, $6 million guaranteed. In August, before the season started, he was arrested for jumping off a balcony at Tennessee State University. He was then arrested for driving under the influence, and he was doing donuts on Charlotte Avenue, which is a major thoroughfare leaving downtown Nashville.
Yes.
With a BAC well above the legal limit.
Mm-hmm.
He then he's put on COVID list twice. He plays 3 snaps in 1 game. He is then arrested for driving 140 miles an hour in Georgia and felony fleeing from police, possession of Schedule I controlled substances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He is no longer in the NFL. First-round draft pick, lottery ticket from God to change his family's life forever financially.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I bring Isaiah Wilson up is not only did I cover him firsthand here in Nashville when I was covering the Titans, but that this is not just the last 13 months since they've won 2 national titles. This goes back further.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the car thing. I don't understand why the car thing keeps coming up. Clearly, these players are allowed to do whatever they want driving around Athens. Now, I don't think this is a Kirby Smart creating a bad culture issue. I think this is, and I know I'm on a soapbox here, so I want you to chime in whenever you feel comfortable.
No, I'm just kind of letting you rant, and then I got stuff to say.
I think what happens is a couple of different things all happen at the same time. To win national championships in college football, you got to recruit players that maybe aren't the exact perfect picture of what you want, because sometimes you're willing to take the best possible athletes and maybe not always the best possible people. That's just one tiny force at play here. The microscope and the spotlight gets way brighter and way stronger and picks up on every single blemish and wart in your program. And you have to be treated differently when you're the 2-time national champion than when you are, 2-10 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's another outside force that's taking place here. I don't think there's a culture problem at Georgia, but it is not a collection of individual incidents the way Stetson Bennett framed it at the Combine. This is a program on a path. It is on a trajectory to ending up in a place where all of this comes home to roost at some point. And right now is the moment that Kirby Smart, the athletic department, the football program, the football team, the coaches, the AD, whatever, they can put an end to all of this stuff if they make some big statements here inside the program, not outside the program, but inside the program. They don't have a bad culture, but if Kirby doesn't do something to stop this behavior where they clearly are told they can do whatever the hell they want with no repercussions, then we are going to be headed into a place where they do have a major culture problem. Does that all make sense?
It all does make sense, and I agree with you on most of the stuff that you just said. I'm not, but I would maybe go a little further and say I don't think Kirby Smart created a bad culture, but I hate to talk about this all the time, but I spent so much time with Vanderbilt baseball that all I can think about when stuff like this happens is like, what would Tim Corbin do, the head coach at Vanderbilt? And this would have been, this never would have happened. And he recruits at the highest level. I will say, because of the size of a football roster, there's a lot more kids on it. Sometimes baseball is a more expensive sport. Sometimes like kids that had, higher income families and therefore maybe had some more support at home were more likely to play baseball. We've seen that baseball really needs to step their game up in terms of including minorities and figuring out a way to get, different cultural socioeconomic groups into the sport, but it is an expensive one. So that kind of creates a little bit of a separation between who you recruit in football and sometimes who you recruit in baseball. But if this had happened this would not have happened underneath Tim Corbin. And if it did, no questions asked. If you put somebody else's life in jeopardy, if you're acting entitled, if you're doing stupid stuff or doing dangerous stuff, you're gone. And then everybody sees that you're gone, and the next person maybe isn't doing that or doesn't feel as invincible. I mean, I don't think Kirby Smart is a bad guy or created a bad culture, but I do think that they are not nixing what is creating a bad culture, which is, I know at some certain point you do have to recruit at the highest level if you want to be the best. But there's a really slippery slope there of that sweet spot to where you're getting the best talent in, but you're not sacrificing values and you're not bringing people in because it's contagious. We saw what's happened with LSU and behavioral issues in the past. Like if you got guys at the top acting up, going out during COVID, drinking, partying, well, guess what? Everybody thinks it's okay. And all of a sudden you've got where did LSU's chaos trickle down from? If the coaching staff.
Yes, if the two head coaches are willing to cover it up, that's where I think there's that's more of a defined culture creation problem at LSU.
Totally.
Under
but
Les
this is starting at the next level down. It's not starting at the top, but it is happening in the program, and it's not being nixed by the top.
Right.
And it's going to be replicated by other guys in the program, and they see what you can get away with. Georgia, Athens law enforcement. Because everyone there is hardcore, like Georgia fans. They're letting these kids probably get away with a little bit more, but you have to set the tone for what's okay and what's not. And when there's danger and people's lives in jeopardy and dangerous activity, I would venture to say this is going to continue to go down this path if you don't send a very strong message as the coaching staff at Georgia.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a difference between like Art Briles, and what's going on at Georgia. I just think that we're talking about two very different levels of stuff. We're talking, but again, what happens when you win at this level? There's kind of two big things that happen when you win at this level. Number one, you might have cut corners to your point about character to get talent. That's part of the process. I see, and that's not a Georgia thing. That's an everywhere in college athletics thing. And that's actually not even college athletics. That's the whole world. That applies to every business. Like if you're a great mortgage bond trader, but you're an asshole, you probably are going to get a mortgage bond job, and you're probably going to go out there and make a bunch of money for your company. Like that's not a new thing. But what happens is two things happen in college athletics specifically, and it's packaged with very young men, very young, impressionable people that are already not fully formed frontal lobes, like that are making mistakes, because that's what happens. All of us did. I did it. We all make mistakes in college.
Right.
And what I think is interesting is the two big things that happen is, one, you are empowered with your success in your community. The more you win, the more power you have inside your little bubble. And the bubble gets tighter, and like the bubble gets less transparent as you win more. So the more you win, the less people hold you accountable or know what's really going on.
Yeah, you become a celebrity, and
Bingo.
Entitlement.
Have you watched the Murdoch documentaries?
I have not, but I have heard.
I just got done with them. Like that 17-year-old kid literally was never told no his entire life. But that's neither here nor there. Far more dramatic, far more dramatic circumstances. But then again, and then the other thing that happens is the spotlight and the focus and the attention and all the love, all that leads to more and more stuff being focused on your program, as I said. And so, one guy gets arrested for public intox, not a big deal at like Kentucky or Tennessee or Missouri right now, because they're not the two-time defending champions. They're not held to the same standard as the way we now view Kirby Smart and Georgia as the gold standard of college football. And that you could say that's unfair if you want to, but that's just the reality. So you've got these little feudal dictator egomaniacs that run these totally, opaque, lack of transparency, little bubble communities where every time you win a game, those athletes get more and more empowered. The coaches get more and more empowered. The athletic directors get more and more empowered. The boosters feel better and better. And it's not a Georgia problem. This happens everywhere. It happens everywhere, and it's happening now to Georgia. And let me end this on one story I heard from the combine this week, because Nolan Smith went up there and had a great weekend. 4.3, 940, elite-looking pass rusher coming off the pectoral injury. Everybody loves Nolan Smith. Of course, he was on the list that I just read off, doing 89 and a 55, no repercussions. I was told this is not a huge deal. This is not a criminal offense. This is not anything, but it is a sign, and it is absolutely something that NFL scouts talk about. And I know I've heard a lot of these stories about a lot of players. Nolan Smith is kind of an asshole to people the entire weekend in Indianapolis. And you know this because you've shot video as a production crew person, right? Like you've been on the production crew. These guys go in and out of dressing rooms and in and out of production studios with NFL Network, with ESPN, with in and out of meetings with general managers.
Teams, yeah.
There are young women everywhere just doing their jobs. And if how you treat those people is noticed by talent evaluators and by scouts and by GMs. And I did not hear positive things about how Nolan Smith, for example, behaved this weekend in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it is very telling. I will say some general managers will probably care more than others, but it is, what team was it that their coach went viral for pulling all the female staff members to the front of the classroom?
Oh, I don't remember that.
Oh my God. Who was it? I'm just totally blanking.
And I don't say that about Nolan Smith to be like, oh, don't draft him. Like, no, he's a fine player. He deserves a shot at his career, and he's going to have he probably is going to be a really good NFL player. It's a tiny nugget. It's a tiny anecdote that indicates that these guys at Georgia right now pretty much feel like they can do whatever they want. And that is now on Kirby to manage that. It's not that it's his fault or that there's a bad culture. It's that this is what happens when you are a two-time defending champion. And this is how it works. This is what you have to deal with when you're at this level. And it's now on the coaching staff and the leaders in the locker room and the people in the front office, or I guess the administration, to try to put an end to all of this.
This is the hardest
the racing is ridiculous. The number of people doing 150 miles an hour is absurd. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. This is the hardest part. To me, this is where you define a program that is like a legacy program versus a program that is playing at an elite level for a certain amount of time. And this is the defining moment, I think, for Georgia, because you know you can win. You've got the talent in place to do that. You've got the coaching staff around you that's capable. This is taking your program from winning a lot to being a legacy program, and that comes in discipline. That's where you go from talent back in a reverb towards discipline and sending the right message and being willing to part with people who are toxic to your culture, even if they are one of the fastest guys on the team or are super talented. You have to but it takes a lot of talent and a lot of resources and talent in place to be able to part with those people. But this is that moment for Georgia is, can you now make it last? And
Bingo.
Making it last comes in the form of discipline, respect, humility, and making sure that you don't sacrifice those things for anything, and then hope that you continue to get the right guys through the door. It's hard to do.
Well, and we'll move on, because we're not sitting here trying to lecture, but like, this is the reality. I think you're exactly right to spin this forward. I don't think there's some sort of massive culture problem that Kirby Smart has created. This happens on its own. And when it happens, the sign of Urban Meyer versus Nick Saban is Urban Meyer can't keep it together. It burns out. You know, Icarus, right? You fly too close to the sun, you burn out, and you die.
Yeah.
Like Florida burnt out because Urban Meyer couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And all the warts came out, and it was way worse than what Georgia's dealing with right now, right? Like, way worse.
And you're riding that talent, you're riding and dying on the talent wave. And then, things will fluctuate, and then you have behavioral issues and lack of discipline. You're just riding this wave with the kids instead of getting there and then being like, we won't sacrifice the way that we do things for anybody. Your staff buys in more, the guys, and then you have guys gravitating towards you because you're like, that is and their parents want them there. Like, that's the program that's right. But it's a hard balance to strike. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it.
Can you keep people grounded? Can you keep them focused? Can you keep them disciplined? Can you keep them hungry? Can you keep them working towards the goal? Like, this is what makes Nick Saban better than everybody else. Better than Les Miles and Coach O, and better than Urban Meyer, and better than even Pete Carroll had some discipline problems at USC. Like, it happens to every one of these programs. The question is, can you kind of like stop it, control it, manage it, and then evolve beyond it? And that's what right now Kirby Smart's he's got to do that the next couple of years. And we don't know until 3 more years from now if he can handle it or not,
And I'm not saying that Saban is like fully, I don't know if it's fair to say that every time there's been a behavioral issue that Saban has jumped on it, but I do think
he's had plenty of his own issues. There's no question.
Right. But you do have the liberty when you get to a certain level in your Alabama as we know them traditionally, to be like, oh, you're going to act like that? Get the hell out.
Saban doesn't care.
And yeah, he'll get rid of you. You don't want to be there. Well, guess what? We don't need you. You're just a piece of the puzzle for us. And there's 5 other guys that are waiting to take over as soon as you mess up. So get out of the way. And then you'll send a message that there's just not room for that stuff.
Like, you think, I think the other coach at Alabama is missing some of that accountability. That's
well,
different subject altogether.